Quentin?
My dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Today, I welcome you to a truly special episode of the Spellbook Chronicles. That means a longer, more in-depth episode. And what better excuse to chug down a nice butterbeer. One of the most iconic, adventurous, and tragic stories of the wizarding world, the Marauders. James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. 4 names that bring to mind laughter, trouble, and a few sleepless nights for poor old Argus Filch. From Hogwarts with their brilliant pranks to their involvement in the Order of the Phoenix during the First Wizarding War, this is a tale of unbreakable bonds and how a betrayal changed everything. But you know, my curiosity is hard to contain. So tell me, who's your favorite Marauder? Let me know in the comments. Come on, Peter, don't take it too hard. Ready? Butterbeers and popcorn in hand, because before we begin, there's something I must do. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good.
The year was 1970. It was a dark time, very, very dark. After nearly 30 years of peace, with the horrors of Gellert Grindelwald now little more than a distant, unpleasant memory, the wizarding community once again faced an inevitable omen, one that refuses to be forgotten. A new war was looming, a war perhaps far more terrible and devastating than the last. History would come to remember it as the First Wizarding War. The rise to power of the Dark Lord, he who must not be named.
Imagine that Voldemort's powerful now. You don't know who his supporters are. You don't know who's working for him and who isn't. You know he can control people so that they do terrible things without being able to stop themselves. You're scared for yourself and your family and your friends. Every week news comes of more deaths, more disappearances, more torturing. The Ministry of Magic's in disarray. They don't know what to do. They're trying to keep everything hidden from the Muggles, but meanwhile, Muggles are dying too. Terror everywhere, panic, confusion. That's how it used to be.
With an army of loyal followers and twisted creatures at his command, he unleashed a campaign of terror so ruthless that even the darkest nightmares paled in comparison. The Ministry of Magic, bastion of law and order, found itself besieged not only by physical assaults, but by the very idea of a new regime, one ruled by blood purity, where Muggle-born witches and wizards were hunted, tortured, killed, or worse. Whispers of the Dark Lord's name became dangerous, a risk too great to take aloud. To speak it was to invite doom. Among the lost was Robert McGonagall Jr., the younger brother of the renowned Minerva McGonagall, who perished for refusing to bow to the Dark Lord's will. Such deaths were not isolated, but part of a grim pattern repeated across the land. Yet, amid this growing darkness, a faint light was kindled. He who had brought hope against Gellert Grindelwald, putting an end to that wave of terror, Albus Dumbledore, understood that the Ministry, wary and slow to act, could not stand alone against such a relentless tide.
It is time.
And so, once more, bearing the responsibility of being regarded perhaps as the most powerful wizard history had seen since Merlin, Albus took upon himself his duty. He would do what had to be done. Little by little, he gathered a clandestine group of witches and wizards, individuals whose bravery and skill transcended titles and official mandates. They called themselves the Order of the Phoenix, the order that, rising from the ashes of war, would bring light, hope, rebirth. A new world, a better world.
Did you know that exclusive Spellbook Chronicles booklets are now available? Ancient volumes filled with secrets just like the ones hidden in the restricted section. But instead of hiding from Madame Pince, all you need is a click. This Muggle technology is amazing. Each booklet contains one of the most beloved stories from the series, enriched with exclusive images. So, what are you waiting for? Start collecting them all. Your support is invaluable. Not only will you enjoy the magic, but you'll also be supporting the channel, allowing us to keep bringing you the most amazing stories, like the one in this episode. So, enjoy the show.
Gather,
The Order's members came from all walks of life.
unite,
Respected ministry officials who saw the truth others refused to face.
resist,
Seasoned auras hardened by years of service.
and strike.
And even those with less savory pasts, whose knowledge of the underworld proved invaluable. There were wizards who until then had shown no interest in politics, like the eccentric Daedalus Diggle and others of great power, such as Aberforth Dumbledore. And among the ranks stood some of the brightest witches of their time. Marlene McKinnon and Dorcas Meadows, so formidable, so feared, that it is said the Dark Lord himself saw no choice but to eliminate her personally. Despite everything, many witches and wizards sacrificed all they had for the cause, placing their own lives and those of their loved ones in constant peril, day after day. Among them, it is impossible not to recall the story of the two brothers, Fabian and Gideon Pruett. Both raised in Gryffindor House at Hogwarts, the pair were known in their time as two of the most promising and gifted wizards of their generation. Fabian was as powerful as he was impulsive and defiant. Gideon, calm and composed, a brilliant strategist and sharp-minded planner. Their actions, often unpredictable and carried out without the full approval of the Order, became a relentless thorn in the Dark Lord's side. And yet, it was their boldness that ultimately led them to a tragic fate. They fell in a Death Eater ambush, too violent and savage to be spoken of in full, even today. What truly matters, however, is the memory of their names and the ideals for which they fought. It is said that their sister,
Fabian,
Molly Pruett,
Gideon,
or as you may know her better, Molly Weasley,
brothers.
honored her brothers by naming her twin sons with the same initials.
F
for Fabian, G
for Gideon,
Fred and George. Two more mischief makers, blessed with extraordinary talent. But, as you well know, just as this is the tale of the Order of the Phoenix, it is also the tale of a quartet of young wizards without whom the Order's story would never have been forged into the legend we remember today. These two stories are forever entwined, bound together from the beginning of the war until its bitter end. And before we return to the war itself, I believe it is only right to turn back a few pages to a story I know you've been longing to explore more than any other. The story of the Marauders. It all began on September 1st, many years ago. As tradition held, it was the first day at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for many young witches and wizards, eager to embark on their own journeys into the wizarding world. Aboard the Hogwarts Express, surrounded by the lush green of the Scottish Highlands, the destinies of two boys became forever intertwined.
My name's James.
James
by the way.
Potter and Sirius
James
Black
Potter.
shook hands, unaware that this simple gesture would be just the beginning of a friendship that would shape the course of events and future generations in the wizarding world. Pure blood heirs of their respective families, the friendship between the two boys, so similar yet so different, was cemented the moment the Sorting Hat placed them both in Gryffindor. James, born to Fleamont Potter and his wife Euphemia, was conceived late in his parents' lives and raised in a household where love and material comfort knew no bounds. Fleamont, a skilled but retired potioneer and entrepreneur, had achieved great success with his creation of Sleek Easy's hair potion in 1926. Both he and Euphemia were elderly, even by wizarding standards, and dedicated themselves entirely to their only son.
James.
It was no surprise then
Come here.
that James grew up proud, arrogant, and boastful, yet with a good heart deep down. It was on his 11th birthday, in anticipation of his admission to Hogwarts, that Fleamont gifted James an artifact passed down through generations in the Potter family. A bloodline descending from none other than Ignotus Peverell, one of the three brothers, and the possessor of a deathly hallow,
This cloak
the cloak of invisibility.
is yours.
Sirius, on the other hand, was the eldest son of the noble House of Black, a once notable pure-blood wizarding family. The third of his name, born to Orion and Walburga Black, both dark wizards and second cousins, Sirius also had a younger brother, Regulus, with whom he never had a close relationship. Sirius felt different, an outsider. In fact, he considered Regulus to be a better son than himself. The Black family held a strong belief in pure-blood elitism. They refused to associate with muggles, muggle-borns, squibs, and blood traitors, even disowning squib family members like Sirius's great-uncle, Marius Black, and insisted that their family only marry within respectable pure-blood circles. Because of these beliefs, they were often forced to marry their own cousins. They also held the dark arts in high regard. In contrast, from a young age, Sirius had a fascination with the Muggle world, shown by his interest in motorcycles. With a strict Slytherin family tradition, his sorting into Gryffindor became a pivotal step in the decline of his relationship with his family. Despite the hatred directed towards him, particularly from his mother and his cousin Bellatrix, Sirius greatly enjoyed life at Hogwarts with his friend James. The two had become practically inseparable, facing adventures together and getting into one scrape after another. During their first year, the duo formed a friendship with two fellow Gryffindors, the lonely and quiet Remus John Lupin and the clumsy, chubby Peter Pettigrew. Peter, who had put the sorting hat in a dilemma during the ceremony, taking over 5 minutes to decide whether to place him in Slytherin or Gryffindor and making him a hat store, was the typical anonymous kid teased for his clumsiness. He looked up to James and Sirius as his idol, skilled in magic, courageous, and admired by all their classmates. Peter, frequently targeted by older students and Slytherins, was often bullied and mocked, much like young Remus, who hid a tragic past behind his reserved nature. His father, Lyle Lupin, a world-renowned expert on non-human spiritus apparitions, such as poltergeists and boggarts, had been contacted by the Ministry of Magic as the Dark Lord rose to power and the First Wizarding War loomed. Alongside other experts on dark creatures, he was sought out in hopes of better understanding the threat and keeping it in check. Lyle gladly accepted an invitation to join the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. In early 1965, Fenrir Greyback was questioned by the Ministry of Magic regarding the deaths of 2 Muggle children. Although he was caught with a pack of werewolves, the Ministry failed to realize that Greyback was one himself due to the poor upkeep of the werewolf registry. Greyback posed as a harmless Muggle tramp, which convinced most of the committee, except for Lyle Lupin, who noticed telltale signs of lycanthropy and recommended keeping Greyback in custody until the full moon, just a day away. However, Lyle's remarks about werewolves being soulless and evil led to his expulsion from the meeting, and Greyback was released, later escaping with the help of accomplices. Greyback soon planned his revenge, and thus began the tragedy. Shortly before Remus Lupin's 5th birthday, the werewolf broke into his bedroom and attacked the defenseless boy, marking him with a curse that would accompany him for the rest of his life: lycanthropy. Little Remus had become a werewolf himself. His parents took him to various healers and did everything they could to make him a normal boy again. But there was no cure for his condition. Yet, despite the difficult situation and the prejudice of the wizarding world against Remus, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, as was his custom, acted against the tide by making special accommodations to allow Remus to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. After the first difficult year at school, during which he kept his status as a werewolf a secret from all the students, inventing stories to explain his monthly disappearances, things changed when some friendly boys from his dormitory, James Potter and Sirius Black, along with the goofy Peter Pettigrew, managed to sense his secret, discovering his true nature. Remus, terrified and certain that his life at Hogwarts would become even more challenging now that his secret was out in the open, was instead taken aback by the playful demeanor of his friends. They started joking around with him on a waxing moon night, trying to help him approach his lycanthropy in a light-hearted and playful way.
Moony?
They began calling him Moony, and from that point on,
Yes.
even the dreaded full moon nights became, for the first time, not so terrible thanks to the company of friends. Friends who would forever protect his secret. Thus, amid jokes and laughter, on that night in late October, the quartet of the Marauders was born. The four friends gradually became inseparable, gaining increasing notoriety within the halls of Hogwarts. Remus began to earn respect. Peter stopped being bullied and even started teasing the more arrogant students himself. As for Sirius and James, who were already popular and by their second year had become respectively Beta and Chaser for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, they became even more so, making them the most sought-after boys by the girls at school. Despite their popularity, there was one girl in particular, a fellow Gryffindor in the same year as the Marauders, who seemed to harbor no particular fondness for the quartet, quite the opposite. A muggle-born girl with flowing red hair and sparkling green eyes, Lily Evans. Lily's best friend, Severus Snape, a half-blood who had been sorted into Slytherin, was often targeted by the group, especially by James Potter, who was always looking for an opportunity to mock him, derogatorily nicknaming him Snivelous Snape. For the vast majority of his time at school, in fact, James was somewhat of an obnoxious youth, with a love for showing off, and an exceptional self-confidence that bordered on arrogance. Severus Snape once remarked that James was so arrogant that criticism simply bounced off him. This rebellious attitude was notably shaped by the negative qualities he developed, such as the habit of ruffling his already messy hair to make it look even more disheveled, as if he had just jumped off his broomstick. He enjoyed hexing Slytherin students, especially Severus Snape, merely for the sake of doing so. But if Snape was targeted, it was also because James aimed to get noticed by Lily Evans, that intelligent and beautiful Gryffindor girl,
Not him again.
the only one with enough guts to stand up to him and tell him off. Lily didn't like James at all.
Go away.
To her, he was nothing more than a self-centered show-off. His behavior towards her friend Severus was intolerable in her eyes.
Leave him alone.
James and Snape had a strong rivalry throughout their time at Hogwarts. Some believe this began due to Snape's jealousy of James's talent in Quidditch and his popularity, as well as Snape's interest in the dark arts, which James despised. However, it is also known that James and Sirius had gotten off on the wrong foot with Snape from the beginning. When they first met Snape during their first year on the Hogwarts Express, they insulted him for his desire to become a Slytherin and mocked him for his nose, setting a solid foundation for rivalry. Their subsequent interactions only served to intensify this conflict. Snape followed the Marauders around, looking for reasons to get them expelled. James, in turn, used the hexes that Snape himself had created against him. Days passed at Hogwarts, and with time and the physical changes typical of adolescence, lycanthropy became increasingly difficult for Remus to manage and endure. To ensure his safety and that of his peers, the boy was taken to a shack each month during his transformations to prevent him from attacking other students. However, this isolation led him to lash out in frustration, causing villagers in Hogsmeade to mistake his screams for those of violent ghosts. To keep the truth about the noises a secret, Dumbledore encouraged these rumors, resulting in the Shrieking Shack gaining a reputation as the most haunted building in Britain. During those years, the Wolfbane potion had not yet been invented, and the psychological pressure Remus faced in trying to combat his curse was making him more and more sullen, gaunt, and silent. It was then that the young Sirius had an insight, an idea as crazy as it was unfeasible. What if on full moon nights, he, James, and Peter could become animals as well? Perhaps Remus would feel less alone. Perhaps that anger and ferocity that overtook him on those nights would be subdued. But how could all this become a reality? Naturally, the three Marauders would need to become animagi. Becoming an animagus is considered one of the most difficult magical skills to master. To become an animagus, a witch or wizard must undergo a long and challenging ritual. The process begins with the individual keeping a single mandrake leaf in their mouth for an entire month, from one full moon to the next. If the leaf is removed or swallowed, the process must start over. On the next visible full moon, the wizard must spit the saliva-covered leaf into a small crystal vial that captures the moon's rays. They then add one of their own hairs, a silver teaspoon of dew, collected from a place untouched by sunlight or human feet for a week, and the chrysalis of a death's head hawk moth. This mixture must be placed in a quiet, dark location without disturbance. The wizard must wait for a lightning storm, chanting the incantation Amato Animo Animato Animagus every sunrise and sunset. If done correctly, they may sense a second heartbeat while touching the wand to their chest, which is normal and should not interrupt the process. When the lightning storm occurs, the wizard retrieves the vial, which should contain a blood-red potion if the previous steps were followed correctly. They must then move to a secure location to safely transform and, using their wand, recite the incantation one last time before drinking the potion. Once completed, the witch or wizard gains the ability to shift between their human and animal forms at will, with or without a wand. However, any mistakes in the process could lead to disastrous results, such as permanent half-human, half-animal mutations. After successfully completing the ritual, the animagus experiences a vision, revealing their new animal form. For 3 years, the Marauders secretly studied and followed the rules of the ritual, trying to achieve their animal forms. And so it happened, during their 5th year at Hogwarts, that the first among them succeeded. Sirius transformed into a powerful dog, black as night. Following him was James, who was able to become a stag with impressive antlers, both animals large enough to keep the wolfish Remus in check. Meanwhile, Peter managed to become a rat. Once a month during the full moon, Sirius, James, and Peter would sneak out of the castle under James's invisibility cloak, transform, enter the Whomping Willow, walk down the tunnel, and meet Remus in the Shrieking Shack. Under their influence, his lycanthropy became more manageable. While his body remained that of a wolf, his mind became less wild in their presence. The 4 of them soon left the confines of the Whomping Willow and roamed the school grounds and Hogsmeade by night. Having become animagi and never officially registered as such with the Ministry of Magic, the Marauders coined nicknames to accompany Mooney. Sirius became Padfoot, Peter became Wormtail, and James became Prongs. But throughout all those years at Hogwarts, the Marauders did not hold back, quite the opposite. In fact, during their 5th year, they perhaps tested their greatest invention, a magical artifact of incredible power and wisdom, infused with the personalities of its 4 creators, the Marauders' Map. They created the map using the Homunculus Charm, a powerful and advanced spell that enchanted it to track the movements of everyone in the castle. The ability of Sirius, Peter, and James to become animagi allowed them to explore the castle grounds undetected at night. Meanwhile, the interior of the castle was mapped over time with the help of James's invisibility cloak. This map proved quite useful to the foursome over the years, until it was confiscated by Argus Filch. Although the precise circumstances surrounding the Maker's loss of their artifact are mostly unknown, it is easy to conclude that they eventually overreached and were cornered by Filch, likely due to a tip-off from Snape, who had become obsessed with exposing his arch-rival, James Potter, for wrongdoing. The animosity between the Marauders and Severus Snape, especially James, worsened day by day. Supporting the quartet was Patricia Rakepick, a Gryffindor a few years older, with whom they had formed a close friendship.
My name is Patricia.
In addition to their shared hatred for Snape, Patricia also had the same adventurous spirit and tendency to break the rules. Because of this, she was detested by most of the professors, who considered her a bad influence on younger students, except for Albus Dumbledore, who regarded her as an exceptionally talented pupil. In many ways, she could be seen as the true mentor of the Marauders, imparting to them cunning and the art of devising sophisticated pranks and tricks. At that time, Patricia was likely the only other person to whom the Marauders had confided the existence of the map.
Ah, there you are, my beloved viewers. Fear not, I'll be quicker than a golden snitch. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here for this episode of the Spellbook Chronicles. And if you think Quentin Pendragon is charming enough to deserve your generous support, you might consider leaving a like. And I highly recommend subscribing to the channel too, clicking the bell icon to make sure you don't miss a single episode. And why not, joining the channel to get priority access to every new video for just a couple of galleons. So, what are you waiting for?
One afternoon in the spring of their 5th year, James and Snape had yet another heated exchange. But this time, James crossed the line, bullying the Slytherin by using a spell he had invented that turned him upside down to reveal his underwear, humiliating him in front of many students, including Lily.
Stop it!
She demanded that James stop, but he responded, I will, if you'll go out with me, Evans. When James lifted the jinx, Snape, in his humiliation and anger, called Lily a filthy little mudblood, deeply hurting her. Immediately, Potter demanded that he apologize.
How dare you.
But Lily retorted that James was as bad as Snape and that she would not date him.
I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you and the giant squid.
This event deeply shook both Lily and Severus. Although it seemed no less trivial than many other moments in the daily lives of adolescents at Hogwarts, it would leave an indelible mark on their bond, shattering the balance that had existed and setting off a chain of events that would ultimately alter the fate of everyone in the wizarding world. Following this event, Potter and Black were expelled from the Quidditch team. James became quiet, likely beginning to develop a sense of guilt over the cruelty he had shown towards Snape. In contrast, Sirius's animosity toward the Slytherin remained unchanged. On yet another full moon night, Snape grew increasingly curious about where Remus went each month and observed Madame Pomfrey taking him to the Shrieking Shack through a secret passage beneath the Whomping Willow. Sirius took advantage of Snape's curiosity and, as a joke, told him that the trick to getting past the Whomping Willow was to poke the knot at its base. Snape followed Sirius's instructions and was nearly at the Shrieking Shack when James pulled him back. At great personal risk, James saved Severus from certain death at the hands of Remus in his werewolf form. However, Snape stubbornly refused to believe that his old rival had acted out of goodwill, assuming instead that Potter had saved him only to avoid expulsion, and he loathed being indebted to him.
Severus.
Albus Dumbledore swore Severus to secrecy,
I must ask
but he
you
now understood Remus's true nature.
Keep this matter between
The
us.
relationship between James and Snape did not improve, but at least it didn't worsen. They simply kept their distance from each other as much as possible. In the meantime, when he turned 16, James's parents allowed Sirius to move in with them so he could escape his own horrible family. Sirius had made a point of hanging Gryffindor banners all over his room at number 12 Grimmauld Place to emphasize his differences from the rest of his family. In addition to the shrine to Godric Gryffindor, he decorated the rest of his room like that of a typical Muggle boy his age. He put up pictures of motorcycles, fighter jets, and posters of models, honoring Muggle achievements in a way that irritated his family. But nothing angered them more than the fact that Sirius found Muggle women attractive. His attitude, completely at odds with the Black family ideals, ultimately led to him being disowned, officially cut off, and replaced in their eyes by his younger brother, Regulus. At Hogwarts, time flew by. The classes became increasingly intense, and even in the rebellious, adventurous spirits of the Marauders, a more mature character began to take root, with their eyes turning toward the future and their destinies once their time at school came to an end. By his 7th year, James had matured considerably, shedding much of the mischievous streak that had once defined him. Despite never having been a prefect, he was appointed head boy alongside Lily, with whom he had the chance to spend more time. The two got to know each other better, and Lily, who had distanced herself from her friend Severus due to his growing sympathy for the Dark Lord's cause and his Death Eaters, began to develop feelings for James Potter. He stopped hexing others for fun, though he and Snape still occasionally hexed each other in secret, with hints that James was willing to let it go for Lily's sake. Around this time, he finally managed to win Lily over, and they began dating. Against all initial odds, the two fell in love. And with the love of James and Lily, the end of their 7th year at Hogwarts also marks the end of the Marauders legend. But the story of the 4 wizards continues, albeit in another chapter, that of the Order of the Phoenix, and the first wizarding war against the Dark Lord. However, that is another story. Once, there was a group of 4 young friends, 4 wizards, bold in spirit, driven by ambition, bound by unshakable loyalty to one another. They shared a fierce desire to leave their mark on the wizarding world.
I solemnly swear
They were known as the Marauders.
that I am up to no good.
Their years as students at Hogwarts had come to an end, but the bond they shared remained unbroken. Though hope still shaped their vision of the future, a shadow loomed ever closer, a threat growing with each passing moment. The war, once spoken of in whispers, had finally begun. The First Wizarding War, as the Daily Prophet had dubbed it, and from the very start, it was clear that this would be no fleeting conflict. How could it be that even Albus Dumbledore, by many considered the greatest wizard of all time, the very man who had defeated Gellert Grindelwald and ended the global wizarding war in 1945, now seemed troubled by the rise of the one whose name most dared not speak, Voldemort?
Dumbledore? Afraid?
James Potter could scarcely believe it.
You're joking.
The young wizard had only recently married the love of his life, the witch Lily Evans, in a quiet ceremony, one kept secret from many due to the ever-present dangers of war. Though the conflict had only just begun, the safety of those who opposed Muggle-born discrimination and the ideology of pure blood supremacy was already in constant jeopardy. And for those who dared to stand openly against it, the risk was even greater, not just for themselves, but above all, for those they held dear. The Death Eaters were on the hunt, ready to spread terror and enforce their ideology with an iron fist, wielding the darkest and most forbidden of magical arts. Not since 1717, when they were outlawed by the Ministry of Magic, had there been such a staggering number of victims claimed by the unforgivable curses. And to such violence, the Ministry responded in kind. Bartemius Crouch, as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, led the Ministry's campaign against Voldemort's forces, his hatred of the dark arts becoming infamous. Any voices calling for moderation were swiftly silenced as Crouch launched a nationwide crusade against Voldemort and his followers, one marked by a level of brutality, ruthlessness, and mercilessness that had never been seen before, taking even the Death Eaters by surprise. The war had now reached a point of no return.
He was tipped as the next Minister for Magic. He's a great wizard, Barty Crouch, powerfully magical and power-hungry. Oh, never a Voldemort supporter. No, Barty Crouch was always very outspoken against the dark side. But I would say he became as ruthless and cruel as many on the dark side.
James and Lily,
We have to fight.
feeling powerless in the face of the ongoing slaughter, knew they had to act.
Justice will be served.
It was a sentiment shared by their dearest friend, Sirius Black, who had stood by James's side as his best man on their wedding day. Sirius, having severed all ties with his own family due to their fanatical pureblood ideology and their unwavering, even financial support of the Dark Lord's war campaign, felt a personal duty to stop his cousin Bellatrix. Rumors spoke of her swift rise through the Death Eater ranks, becoming one of Voldemort's most devoted and lethal followers, leaving a trail of bodies in her wake. But it was different thoughts that weighed heavily on young Remus Lupin. He felt the shadow of his past creeping back, darker and more insidious than ever. The name Fenrir Greyback, the werewolf responsible for his curse, was once again being whispered in fearful tones after years of silence. Alongside giants and many other werewolves, Greyback had become one of the Dark Lord's most dangerous enforcers. With each passing month, the full moon grew heavier upon Remus. His curse, once a closely guarded secret, had over time become common knowledge. Despite graduating from Hogwarts with top marks, he found himself unable to secure any kind of employment, shunned and rejected at every turn. Because of Voldemort, werewolves had once again become a feared menace, much as they had been in the dark centuries of the Middle Ages. Peter Pettigrew, on the other hand, the least daring and perhaps the least talented wizard of the group, could do little more than echo his friend's frustration. offering his support and proving himself ready to do whatever was needed, should they call upon him. He cared for them deeply. To Peter, they had always been like brothers. At Hogwarts, they had looked out for him, pulling him out of trouble, time and time again. And now, faced with the looming dangers of war, Peter felt vulnerable, lost without his fellow Marauders by his side. And yet, something inside him was beginning to change. He started to feel small, too small. Why did James always have to be the bravest? Why was Sirius always the most skilled duelist? Why was Remus always the cleverest? And why did he always have to be the most insignificant? Peter longed to prove himself, to do more, to be more. Above all, he craved the chance to make a difference, to earn the admiration of his friends at last. It was an autumn day in 1977 when the lives of the four friends, along with Lily's, were forever changed. Albus Dumbledore had summoned them for a message of the utmost secrecy.
There's a group,
he told them. A group formed to combat Voldemort's growing power and the ever-mounting threat he posed. A secret group, never officially sanctioned by the Ministry of Magic. And yet, a group whose mission many believed in. The Order of the Phoenix. So the rumors were true. For years, whispers had circulated about a society of rebellious witches and wizards, those bold enough to risk everything to stand against Voldemort and his Death Eaters on the front lines. And now, at last, the opportunity they had all been waiting for since leaving Hogwarts had arrived. The Order of the Phoenix had been founded by Albus Dumbledore in 1970, back when they were only just beginning their school years, when the First Wizarding War was little more than a prelude to the darkness yet to come. But from the very start, the wizard had known that Lord Voldemort, born Tom Marvolo Riddle, a former Hogwarts student just like them, was a threat that could not be underestimated. Perhaps in time, he would prove even more fearsome than Gellert Grindelwald himself. Over the years, many Aurors loyal to Dumbledore had joined the Order of the Phoenix, taking part in covert, strategic strikes aimed at dismantling the Dark Rebellion. Thanks to their efforts, the group had built an intricate counterintelligence network, one that proved invaluable in the escalating war. Particularly ingenious was Dumbledore's innovation, modifying one of the most complex spells known to wizardkind, the Patronus, to serve not only as a guardian, but also as a messenger, capable of speaking and carrying vital information between members of the Order.
we know where he is.
And so, James, Lily, Sirius, Remus, and Peter became part of history, officially joining the Order of the Phoenix. The superiority of Voldemort's forces had already claimed several victims within the group, such as Fabian and Gideon Prewett. The Bones family was almost entirely wiped out. Benji Fenwick was brutally murdered, and so was Marlene McKinnon, whom Rubeus Hagrid described as one of the most powerful and brilliant young witches of her time. Her entire family was obliterated. Yet despite the heavy losses, the Order of the Phoenix still had formidable members within its ranks. Chief among them was the veteran Auror, Alastor Moody, whose relentless efforts were said to have filled half the cells in Azkaban with Death Eaters he had personally captured. Moody had gained a fearsome reputation, known to have killed several of Voldemort's followers, including Evan Rosier, a duel that left him with significant facial scarring. However, despite the Ministry granting Aurors free rein to use the unforgivable curses, Moody only resorted to lethal force when absolutely necessary. His skill and determination were exemplified when, after 6 months of relentless pursuit, he managed to capture Igor Karkaroff alive, an achievement that coincided with some of the most crucial arrests of the war. The Order received a much-needed reinforcement with the arrival of powerful witches and wizards. Not only James and Lily, but also Frank and Alice Longbottom, their former Hogwarts classmates, who had recently married and were exceptionally skilled. Over time, the couple drew the ire of Bellatrix Lestrange, not by provocation, but simply by excelling in their duty. Their skill and determination led to the capture, arrest, and imprisonment of numerous Death Eaters throughout the First Wizarding War, making them a thorn in the Dark Lord's side and a prime target for his most ruthless lieutenant. Frank and Alice, like James and Lily, were among the few who faced Voldemort himself in direct combat, a duel unlike any other. The Dark Lord, intrigued by the sheer skill and bravery James and Lily had displayed, extended them an invitation to join his ranks, eager to claim such talented and fiercely loyal witches and wizards for his cause. To James, Voldemort promised a reign of peace and security, after what he deemed a necessary war to restore order. With Lily, however, he preyed upon her deepest insecurities and fears, the abandonment and rejection by her sister, a muggle consumed by envy, incapable of understanding or appreciating the gift of magic. Yet neither of the two Gryffindors were swayed by the Dark Lord's seductive words. They escaped his grasp and faced him once more, twice defying him and surviving. The same fate befell Frank and Alice. 3 direct encounters with Voldemort, 3 times they lived to tell the tale. A coincidence that, in time, would not be overlooked by the Dark Lord's superstitious mind. The autumn of 1979 brought with it an unexpected glimmer of joy amidst the ever-present shadow of war.
Big news.
Lily and James were expecting a child, a son they would name Harry. Peter, Remus, and Sirius, who was later chosen as the boy's godfather, could not have been happier.
About time.
For a brief, precious time, the horrors of battle seemed like nothing more than a distant, fading nightmare. But alas, that fleeting sense of peace was merely an illusion. A decade into the war, at the zenith of his power, an unforeseen event would irrevocably alter the course of history and shift the balance of the conflict. Sybil Trelawney, just over 20 and desperately seeking employment, encountered Albus Dumbledore in Hogsmeade at the Hog's Head Inn, where she was residing in hopes of securing the position of Professor of Divination at Hogwarts. Although Dumbledore had no intention of continuing the subject at the school, he decided to offer her a chance due to her lineage. Unfortunately, Sybil demonstrated a complete lack of talent in the art of divination, prompting Dumbledore to decline her request. Yet, against all odds, she entered a genuine trance at that moment and made a fateful prophecy.
The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies.
The meaning of the prophecy, though enigmatic, was unequivocal in one aspect. The Dark Lord would be defeated. A chosen one would be born, whose existence was inextricably linked to Voldemort and his ultimate downfall. But who could it be? Besides Albus Dumbledore, another individual had the chance to overhear the prophecy, Severus Snape, who at the time served as a covert informant for the Dark Lord and was a Death Eater. However, fate dictated that Snape only heard a fragment of the prophecy, delivering an incomplete message to Voldemort that lacked critical components for its full comprehension. Feeling threatened, the Dark Wizard acted swiftly to thwart the prophecy's fulfillment, becoming consumed by it. After a lifetime dedicated to accumulating power and knowledge at the edge of mortal comprehension, and perhaps coming closer than any man before him to achieving divinity, he could not allow himself to fall. This simply must not happen. At that time, 2 infants could have been the subject of the prophecy: Harry Potter, the half-blood son of James and Lily Potter, and Neville Longbottom, the pure blood son of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Both families had sought to thwart Voldemort 3 times and were members of the Order of the Phoenix. Both children were born at the end of July. But which one? After much contemplation, Voldemort opted for young Potter. Neville Longbottom was a pure blood belonging to the Sacred 28, the British families considered truly pure blood as of the 1930s, whereas Harry shared a similar humble lineage with Tom Marvolo Riddle. he had Muggle blood flowing through his veins. Voldemort believed that for the prophecy to hold significance, his nemesis must reflect his own nature, his shadow. Snape knew all too well what that would mean. Lily would die, and her son along with her. This couldn't happen. It must not happen. Despite the darkness of those final years, Severus had never truly let go of his love for that smiling girl with the red hair, the only person in the world who had ever been able to bring light into his gray, dreary sky. Severus begged Voldemort to spare her, and the Dark Lord reluctantly agreed.
I beg you.
However, knowing that he could not trust anyone else to protect Lily, especially someone as capricious as Voldemort, who might change his mind on a whim, and understanding that Lily would likely fight to the death to protect her child, Severus made his choice. He decided to abandon the Dark Lord for good, and went to Albus Dumbledore, desperate to ask for his help in saving her. He pleaded with him to hide Lily, along with her husband and son, if he had to. The old wizard agreed, but insisted that Severus serve him as a spy among the Death Eaters. And so, the Order of the Phoenix welcomed a new member. Once the Dark Lord's intentions became clear, the Potters knew there was no time to waste.
Let's go.
They had to disappear, and quickly. With the help of a carefully devised plan orchestrated alongside Dumbledore, they decided that the safest course of action was to take refuge in Godric's Hollow. The old wizard had spent his childhood there, and still had trusted allies willing to offer their support.
I need your help.
Among them, the renowned magical historian, Bathilda Bagshot.
Bathilda.
Nevertheless, the Order believed that, to ensure the couple's utmost protection, it would be essential to select a secret keeper, a witch or wizard designated to hide a secret by means of the Fidelius charm, embedding it in their very soul. Once a keeper was selected, the person who told them the secret would find themselves unable to pass the information on again, as the secret keeper was the only one capable of revealing it, whether orally or written. The secret keeper could tell as many people as they liked, but they must do so voluntarily. The secret couldn't be blackmailed, bewitched, or tortured out of them.
An immensely complex spell involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person, or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find. Unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you know who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them, not even if he had his nose pressed against their sitting room window.
James and Lily had no doubts. Sirius was to be their secret keeper. He was, after all, their most trusted friend.
We trust you.
The most loyal, the most capable.
No.
But Sirius disagreed. In a desperate bid to outwit Voldemort,
Peter.
he persuaded them to choose Peter Pettigrew instead.
Me?
After all, who would ever suspect timid, unremarkable, easily overlooked Peter?
It's the safer way.
In the warmth of that summer, on the 31st of July, 1980, Harry Potter came into the world. For a time, within the quiet sanctuary of their hidden refuge, Lily and James devoted themselves entirely to their son.
What is it?
Shielded from prying eyes and guarded with the utmost care, those first months were filled with love and laughter, a fleeting moment of peace in a world teetering on the edge of darkness. So reads a letter written by Lily to Sirius during those days, later found by Harry many years after.
Dear Padfoot, thank you. Thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favourite by far. 1 year old and already zooming along on a toy broomstick. He looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing a picture so you can see. You know it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but he nearly killed the cat and he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Of course, James thought it was funny. Says he's going to be a great Quidditch player. But we've had to pack away all the ornaments and make sure we don't take our eyes off him when he gets going. We had a very quiet birthday tea, just us and old Bathilda, who has always been sweet to us, and who dotes on Harry. We were so sorry you couldn't come, but the Order's got to come first, and Harry's not old enough to know it's his birthday anyway. James is getting a bit frustrated shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore's still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. If you could visit, it would cheer him up so much. Wormy was here last weekend. I thought he seemed down, but that was probably the news about the McKinnons. I cried all evening when I heard. Batilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure he'd be pleased if he knew. I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore could ever have been friends with Gellert Grindelwald. I think her mind's going, personally. Lots of love, Lily.
Unfortunately, things didn't go as they had hoped. Just as they believed Voldemort would underestimate Peter, they had done the same. Throughout that final year of the war, Peter had remained in the background, unnoticed. No crucial missions had ever been entrusted to him. He had begun to feel useless, his frustration festering first into self-loathing, then into resentment toward his friends. Amid the chaos of death and brutality that defined the First Wizarding War, Peter's thoughts grew twisted, darker with each passing day, until at last, fear took hold. Perhaps, he thought, if he revealed the secret to the Dark Lord, his own life would be spared. Perhaps Voldemort would even show mercy to James and Lily. After all, it was the child he truly wanted. Maybe, for the first time in his miserable existence, Peter would be rewarded for his actions. Maybe, for once, he would finally be someone.
Tell me.
And so,
Peter
Pettigrew
where are
made his choice.
the Potters?
He betrayed his friends, revealing their secret to the Dark Lord, and in doing so, he sealed his fate, becoming, at last, a Death Eater. On Halloween night, 31st October 1981, Pettigrew disclosed the Potter's location to his master. Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow, and with the Fidelius charm broken, he simply entered their home. Once inside, he murdered James and Lily, who were unarmed. The two young members of the Order could do nothing against Voldemort's might this time. However, an inexplicable event occurred that night, perhaps the most mysterious and baffling moment in the entire history of the Wizarding world. When the Dark Lord aimed his wand at the infant, unleashing the deadly green light of Avada Kedavra, the curse that kills without any chance of defense, it rebounded, causing no harm to little Harry. Instead, the curse turned upon its master, disintegrating his body. Among all the theories surrounding this occurrence throughout history, one explanation stands out above the rest: love. Lily's selfless sacrifice for her son created a powerful protective barrier of ancient magic around Harry that shielded him for many years to come.
Ancient magic.
But for the Order of the Phoenix, the war was far from over. That same tragic night, Alice and Frank Longbottom received an unexpected visit. Bellatrix Lestrange, on the run with a group of Death Eaters, including Barty Crouch Jr., was consumed by rage, unable to accept the Dark Lord's defeat. Desperate to find a way to restore him, she unleashed every ounce of her fury and despair upon the two Aurors. With violence, the Cruciatus curse was unleashed upon the couple, tortured to the brink of exhaustion. Bellatrix sought information about the whereabouts of the Dark Lord, information the Longbottoms could never have known. The pain, pushed beyond any limit, drove the couple to madness. Frank and Alice were placed in the Janus Thicky ward for irreversible spell damage at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. And due to the extreme torture they endured, they were left unaware that they had a son together.
Dad?
This crime ignited a wave of fury across the wizarding community, so intense that the Ministry of Magic faced critical pressure to apprehend those responsible. When Bellatrix was captured, she was tried before the Council of Magical Law and sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban. Unlike many other Death Eaters, she did not deny her loyalty. Bellatrix proudly declared her unwavering allegiance to Voldemort and insisted she would wait for his return. When Sirius Black arrived in Godric's Hollow and saw the lifeless bodies of his friends, he understood everything. Aside from Lily and James, he was the only one who knew that Pettigrew had been their secret keeper.
Filthy traitor.
The weight of that realization would haunt him for the rest of his life. Sirius, as James and Lily's chosen guardian for their son, immediately offered to take him in.
No.
But Rubeus Hagrid, following Dumbledore's instructions, insisted that Harry was to be taken to his aunt, Petunia.
Fine.
Resigned and broken,
Just take it, Hagrid.
he handed over his flying motorbike to Hagrid, telling him he wouldn't need it
I won't be
anymore.
needing it anymore.
Overcome with guilt and fury, and knowing of Pettigrew's betrayal, Sirius wasted no time. He tracked Peter down, determined to take revenge. But Pettigrew was quicker. As Sirius approached, Peter unleashed a powerful explosive curse, obliterating everything around him and killing 12 muggles in the process. In the chaos, he severed his own finger, leaving it behind as evidence of his supposed demise before vanishing, transformed into the small, insignificant creature he truly was. Sirius was arrested, accused of being a Death Eater, of murdering Peter and the Muggles, and of betraying the Potters. Without trial, he was sent straight to Azkaban. The surviving Muggles who had witnessed the event had their memories erased, with the incident officially explained away by the Muggle-worthy excuse committee as a mere gas explosion. Meanwhile, Peter, believed to have died heroically confronting Sirius, was posthumously awarded the Order of Merlin First Class. His mother was presented with both the honor and the only thing left of him, a single severed finger. The last of the Marauders, Remus Lupin, was left utterly heartbroken. 3 of his closest friends were gone, murdered, betrayed, and Sirius, the man he had once trusted with his life, was now locked away in Azkaban. The war was over, and yet, why did it feel so impossible to smile again?
And so, my dear adventurers of the wizarding world, we've come to the end of this special episode. The Marauders taught us so much, that true friends stand by you even in the darkest times. And it's only in those moments, when everything seems to go wrong and the stakes are high, that people reveal their true nature, for better or for worse. I'm always your charming Quentin Pentagran, and with that, I bid you farewell, and look forward to the next spellbinding adventure, Mischief Managed.